Welcome to Standing Apart, the podcast about why being different is a superpower, with me, Nigel. In the last episode, I spoke with Paul Ingram from Columbia Business School about values. We talked about how you work out your personal values, how corporate values can define culture, and we touched briefly on hiring. This episode is the practical follow-on because I want to deal with the thing that everyone thinks but nobody says out loud. Let's face it, corporate values are often marketing BS most of the time. Not always, but often enough that the word values makes people roll their eyes. And the problem isn't that values are a bad idea. The problem is that values written for strangers don't survive contact with real life. So today we're going to do three things. Get clear on the difference between values and culture. Walk through the elephant traps that turn values into theatre. And lastly, give you a simple way to make values live, including how hiring either locks them in or exposes them as fiction. And yes, before you ask, there is a rant this episode, and also, yes, the long-awaited return of Superhero of the Week. You're welcome. Here's the blunt distinction. Corporate value statements are usually written for outsiders. Customers, candidates, procurement, the internet. Culture is written by what happens internally on a wet Tuesday when something goes wrong. Culture is not what you say you believe. Culture is what you tolerate, reward, and promote. So when your values and your culture don't match, the value statement becomes a credibility problem. It tells people leadership either doesn't notice what's happening or doesn't care enough to fix it. And there's a simple test. If your values could be copy-pasted onto your competitor's website without anyone noticing, you've written generic filler, not something that guides behaviour. Integrity, excellence, respect. Lovely. Who's against those? But they don't differentiate you and they don't guide decisions because nobody can tell when they've been violated. Let me give you a true example. Anonymous for obvious reasons. About 10 years ago, I worked with an organisation where the corporate values and the culture were explicitly defined. Properly, clear language. Everyone knew what the company claimed it stood for. And then the CEO didn't act in accordance with any of it. Not occasionally, systematically. He'd say one thing, do another, and then act surprised when people weren't walking the talk. This is the bit leaders miss. People don't follow your value statement, they follow your behaviour. If the CEO violates the values and nothing happens, the culture learns the real value is power gets a pass. And once that lesson is learned, you can't poster your way out of it. Right, elephant traps, the things that quietly kill values. Well, trap one is the one that we've heard already, two-tier values. Leadership behaves one way, everyone else gets policed by a different standard. Trap two is values with no trade-offs. Take a value like we put customers first. Great, until a customer asks for something that breaks your team or wrecks your margins. If it never forces you to say no to revenue, it isn't doing any work. Trap 3, values with no behavioural definition. If I can't watch a meeting and tell whether you're living that value, it's too vague to be useful. Trap 4, no enforcement. Also known as the brilliant jerk problem. If someone hits their numbers but violates the values and nothing happens, everyone learns that the real value is results at any price. And the final trap, trap 5, drift. The business changes but the values don't, and everyone can feel the mismatch. And we're going to come back to this topic of values in a moment, but for now, it's rant time. We all have to let off steam, but as ever, for the sake of my well-being, I try to keep my rants to less than 1 minute. Here we go. I tried to buy a coffee last week and ended up in the digital equivalent of an escape room. QR code, menu on my phone, then an app, then a loyalty scheme, then an email capture, then something trying to work out whether I was human or not, then a payment screen that asked me if I wanted a tip before I'd even received the coffee. I'm not against tech. I'm against pointless hurdles. If you want to modernize the experience, make the simple things simpler. Let me order quickly. Let me pay quickly. Let me leave quickly. Don't turn a flat white into a user journey. And the best bit? Half the time, the new system is slower than a person with a pen, even if they end up calling me Neil. Anyway, rant over. Right, back to the topic of corporate values. If you want values that shape culture, you need a system that works when people are tired, busy, and slightly irritated. Here's the framework I tend to suggest. Step 1, keep it small. 4 or 5 values is about right. Beyond that, people can't hold them in their heads. Step 2, write the trade-off for each value. So what do I mean by that? 1 sentence. We will do X even when it costs us Y. If you can't write that sentence, you don't yet have a value you can run a business on. Step 3 is defining behaviours. For each value, write 3 green flags, what behaviours you'd expect to see and hear, and 3 red flags, what behaviours break it. This is where most values programs fall over. Words are easy, behaviour is specific. Step 4, add a ritual. Something weekly that keeps the values alive. As a simple one, at the end of a leadership meeting, ask, where did we pay the price for our values this week? If the answer is nowhere, don't celebrate, get curious. Either the values are too vague to create trade-offs, or you're not using them. And finally, step 5, add consequences. Decide in advance what happens when a value is violated. Not in theory, in practice, including when the person is senior, popular, or high-performing. And now I want to share the most practical trick I've seen for turning abstract values into everyday behaviour. I worked with a small company who wanted to come across as engaging, warm, authentic, likeable, and calm. They all bought in. Then they asked the right question: how do we stay like that when we're under pressure? So they picked a TV celebrity that they all knew, Matt Baker, and they plastered the office walls with his photo. And the rule was simple: if in doubt, be more Matt. You can laugh, but it solved a real problem. It gave them a shared reference point. When someone was about to fire off a snippy email or get defensive with a customer, the team had a quick check. What would Matt do here? That's the move. Take a value and give people a usable prompt they can reach for in the moment, because culture is built out of tiny decisions made quickly. I now want to expand on something that Paul Ingram and I touched on in the last episode: hiring. Hiring is where values either get reinforced or quietly undermined. If you want to hire for values, you need to test for them with a bit of structure. So for each value, build 3 checks. A behavioural question. This could be framed as, tell me about a time when. You're listening for what they did, what it cost them, and what they learned. Secondly, a scenario question. What would you do if? Make it uncomfortable. Add a trade-off: time pressure, a demanding customer, or a senior person pushing for a shortcut. Thirdly, a work example. A short exercise that forces the trade-off you care about. If you value clarity, give them messy information and see how they structure it. If you value customer care, give them an awkward complaint and see how they respond. Then, as always with hiring, do references properly. Skip the "would you hire them again" questions. Ask, when were they under stress and what did they do? That's where you'll find out who the real person is. I haven't done a superhero of the week for some time, but I'm delighted that it has made a return in this episode. This week, it's the new Prime Minister of Hungary, Peter Magyar. Peter was up against the authoritarian populist Viktor Orban, who, over the course of 16 years, and with the help of his friend in the Kremlin, rebuilt the Hungarian institutions to ensure that he stayed in power. The corruption was hidden in plain sight, with his best friend, who was a gas fitter, becoming a billionaire. So with the odds stacked against him, how did Magyar win? A few things stand out that translate directly into business differentiation. He had a repeatable story that people could summarize in one sentence. A clean before and after framing of the narrative. And direct communication. He got in front of people rather than waiting for friendly coverage. There are reports that he visited 8 to 10 towns per day during the campaign. Sometimes nothing beats hard work. In terms of message discipline, he returned to the core theme instead of chasing every argument. You don't need to like the arena to learn from the mechanics, but standing apart often looks like clarity plus speed, delivered with discipline. One to ponder. That's almost it for this episode. I hope you've heard something you can put to work in your business straight away. If you want a simple starting point from today, here's what I would suggest. Pick 4 or 5 corporate values. Write the trade-off for each. Define 3 green flags and 3 red flags. Add 1 weekly ritual. And finally, decide what happens when somebody violates them. If you found this useful, do someone a favour and share this episode with them. Remember, all past episodes are still available, so do have a browse. I've got a few fascinating guest interviews coming up. To make sure you don't miss those, please subscribe. My own book, The Time Traveller's Guide to Management, which incidentally has a full chapter on hiring, is now available on my website, and I've put a link to purchase in the show notes. And a quick reminder, this show only grows if listeners like you back it. The algorithms will not do it for us. So if you can, hit subscribe, leave a rating, and tap that like button in your favourite podcast app. It really helps more than you might think. Until next time, whatever you do, stand apart from the crowd. Standing Apart is a Sun Bear Consulting production.